Hello, this is Gene. I talk about a lot of things on this channel, from the political side to sporting when it comes to Manchester United. But really, one of my first loves has been Florida State supporter since I was a little kid, even before Bobby got there. And I normally don't talk about them too much because they kind of kill me every year. I have a problem even just watching them because the stress that I have from them, it's just ingrained inside of me so much that I feel if I'm watching it, they're going to lose. So, and I've seen many, many times that we had games won, and then especially to Miami years ago, and this is Miami week. But I do want to talk about what could be a nightmare scenario for Florida State if we go undefeated. There's still a possibility that they'll leave us out because for some reason the ACC isn't looked at as a certain level of a competition, and it seems like that ESPN was been kind of like pushing this shit across as much as well. And a lot of these pundits are saying we should in the top four, that Washington should be ahead of us. Of course, Pac-12 has never been to a championship game. Yeah. Anyway, so I really, really think this would happen. That it would be very hard for us to get the top four if it happens. Now, normally things doesn't play out this way, but it happened back in 1996, I think it was. Florida State was undefeated. We beat Florida State, or Florida, who was undefeated, and we went number one. And everybody lost, and all of a sudden, now we had to play Florida again. So we beat Florida, had to play them again. The next game was against Florida 5 or 6 weeks later. So they had all this time to sit there and say that we were hitting the quarterback too much and saying shit, and the referees would do something about it. And of course, it was an SEC country in the Super Bowl, or the Superdome there down in Louisiana. And I went to that game, and it was a close game until Warwick Dunn got hurt. It was 24-20, and we didn't score after that. They scored four more touchdowns. Um, but the entire place was like 75% Florida Gators or SEC people. Um, and that decade, we were in several champions. We had several chances to win the championship, and we just wouldn't do it. Did it in '93, and then '99 we won defeated and beat Virginia Tech. But in between there, we could have 3 or 4 other ones. Um, and wide right, wide left, whatever. I've been through all of it. But I really believe, because I had this. This happened back in '96 as well. I said I think everybody's going to lose. Everybody lost, right? Everybody lost and allowed Florida to come back into the concession. All they did is they beat, I think, Mississippi State in the SEC championship game. Um, that's back when Alabama was shit. So that side of the SEC was shit as well. And I do want to talk about the SEC this year as well, because they've been down. I've been talking about it on other channels and talking to people. For a while, they've been bad. They usually have 1 or 2 really good teams at the top, but the rest of the competition is not as good as people think it is. And especially now with NAL and stuff, it's not going to be the same. And that's why people like Saban didn't want that to happen, because he knew he was going to lose all his power that he had to go to play at Alabama, because of prestige now. Now the guys sit there and transfer after a year. But anyway, this is what I think that could possibly happen. Michigan and Ohio State are going to play each other. So whoever wins that game, if they go ahead and continually goes undefeated, they will be in the playoff, because most people say that the SEC and the Big Ten are the best teams, best conferences. I don't necessarily believe that. I think that there's good teams in all conferences, but I can't look at the entire Big Ten and say that it's a really good conference. I think that if Penn State played Florida State 10 times, we beat them 9 times. And if that's their second or third best team in the Big Ten, I don't think they're that good. And I'm talking about before even when we've been bad the last years, I think we would have beat Penn State. In some of those years, I think would have beat Ohio State or Michigan. But that's just me having my Seminoles glasses on. But anyway, so they're going to go. One of those teams are going to be in the playoff if they continually go undefeated. And it would be nice if Michigan gets it and wins everything, and then they loses it the next year because of all the shit they're doing. I think this is a very good possibility. Georgia gets their undefeated SEC championship game, and Alabama shows up in the SEC and beats it by a point. What do you do with Alabama and Georgia at that point? I think that most people will say, well, clearly Georgia's better than Florida State, so they should be above him. And Alabama will be the SEC champion. They're going to be in the playoff if they have a one loss. It's going to happen. So they're going to push out an undefeated other Power 5 conference like Washington or ACC. It's going to happen because they have this bias for SEC because they've won all these championships. It's like if you continually put 2 of them in there, that happens. Anyway, so I think that there's a very good possibility that happens. And let's say Washington runs out. If Washington wins out, that means they would be, if Oregon only loses to Washington, they would have beaten 2 teams in the top 10. And looking at our schedule, it'll look better than ours because all the guys we beat, Clemson is not having a good year, even though they beat Notre Dame. LSU lost to Alabama on the road, although we beat them by more in a neutral state. They'll say, well, that was the first game of the year, and they weren't the team that showed up against Alabama. That will be the SEC apologists. That's what they will say. So then you have the whether it's who is the better resume when it comes to the one team that's left. If Georgia loses by like 1 point at Alabama, Georgia is in a unique position that they're a 2-time defending champion. If they lose by 1 point in the SEC championship game against a 1-loss Alabama, I just do not believe that the committee is going to kick them out for an undefeated Washington or an undefeated Florida State. So then you have to say between Washington and Florida State, who gets the nod? I don't think we have the better resume than they do. I just think that, and a lot of people are making this play already that the Pac-12 is the best conference this year, and I think that it's competitive. All right, and I think Oregon is the best team in that conference. Oregon should beat Washington, but we'd be in the same position if Oregon goes in and they were undefeated and we were undefeated and we had Georgia and Alabama both had 1 loss and Georgia's was in the SEC championship game, and they're the defending champions, and then Ohio State or Michigan was undefeated. I think Florida State gets left out because we do not have, even though a lot of people know about us and we're a national brand, we're not Michigan. I mean, we're not. I think we're a better program than Georgia is. Georgia hadn't done shit until the last 2 years as far as actually winning championships. They've been in the playoff, they've got to championship games, but they've never won national championships in over 40 years till they did recently. And they're a good team. And a lot of people say that on paper they should be there. But if the community says that winning your championship, your conference championship, is more important than anything else, and also going undefeated in the Power 5, that should actually put Georgia out. But it will not happen because they will be the 2-time defending champion who probably might go into that game as number 1 in the country. They're not going to push them out in number 5. It won't happen. Unless, like what happened years ago when Ohio State destroyed Wisconsin or something like that, and that pushed him in. All of a sudden, Ohio State won they won that year because we lost to fucking Oregon in a game that people still thinks that they beat the shit out of us. We have no defense that year, but we continually gave them the ball. That game should have been 50-50. Oregon was not a better team than us, and if we'd have got past Oregon, I think we would have boat rode Ohio State. And they beat Alabama and Oregon, so they deserve. They won, but they lost to Virginia Tech that year. But anyway, I think we're going to have this, and I think that in one way or the other. I don't really. The other issue as well. Let's just say this. Let's say Oregon says we go in and we beat the shit out of Washington. We should have bought them the first time, but we beat the shit out of them. So we actually avenged our only loss, and we did it in great fashion. So I think they might go ahead of us, even though we're undefeated. I think there's a claim for it, especially if Washington's undefeated when they go to the Big 12 championship game. They'll be in the top 5 no matter what, so they'll have they'll have that win. So it's a very hard thing to say. So I understand when things came out a couple weeks ago, it says it's, I think Florida State had like a 12% chance to get to the playoff. These are the reasons why. Because they even though our strength of schedule is at is above Georgia, Georgia's got the worst out of conference schedule in the country. But because they're Georgia, plus they're the defending champions 2 times, and if they just lose a very close game against Alabama, say if something happens that should have won and Georgia should have won, and why would Georgia even? There have been so many times in the SEC championship game, whoever loses that, if it's like the one that's undefeated going in there, they still go into the playoff. They don't really have to win that game. Georgia didn't win one year. They went in there and lost the SEC championship game, came back and won the national championship game. Now, unfortunately, we didn't have other teams that were undefeated in the Pac-12 or in the ACC. I think Clemson was. We didn't have enough undefeated teams in Power 5 that would stop that from happening. But Georgia has been the best team the last 3 years. So I do not believe that they end up losing after winning like 25, 26 in a row, that they're going to say, no, you're not going to be in the playoff. I just don't believe they'll do that. So, Alabama can beat fucking Georgia. I mean, Alabama's getting better every week. Now, I live in Alabama. I see what they're doing. Their quarterback's getting better. Their defense is not elite yet, but it's good enough. I think LSU could have beat them. I think there's a different level between Georgia and Alabama, but if Georgia knows they're going to be in the playoff, why do they care? I mean, they want to go undefeated. I do not believe that they will kick them out. They'll have both SEC guys in there again, and then you're gonna have Michigan in there, of course, or Ohio State, because everybody thinks the Big Ten is so good. I think it's all bullshit. I don't think they are. And whatever with the Michigan case that's going on right now, it makes you wonder even more because Michigan doesn't have any better athletes than some of the other teams in that conference. And the thing that we changed almost a lot of our team because through NIL and getting the players into the transfer portal, and there are a lot of coaches that don't like that. They don't like that way of changing the game, even though Dion does it and everything is great. There's no way in my mind that we get in if we have a loss anywhere. And again, the fact is that Miami keeps losing and Florida keeps losing, so that means that those are not good. They're not good victories, even though these are good. Florida would be considered a good out-of-conference schedule. Being Florida and LSU in your out-of-conference should be saying that's a good schedule. And I have to hope that LSU wins the rest of their games and end up 9-3 or something. But I can't bring on that. And because I have this affinity of knowing that shit goes bad from Florida State, because it should have happened before, I just don't know that being undefeated is going to win it for us. It's going to get us in the playoff. And we'll just have to deal with it, I guess, if that happens. And if we go and I imagine it that way, we might actually play. I don't even know if Alabama and Georgia is still in there. We might end up playing like Texas in the Cotton Bowl or something like that. Of course, that would be another thing. We'll be in their own fucking stadium, basically. And then if we beat Texas, then we could say, well, we beat Alabama. Let's see if Alabama goes through and wins a national championship. I mean, I think there'll be, remember not years ago, but when UCF was undefeated and they said they should have the championship. If we go undefeated and we don't get in the playoff and we beat like someone like Texas, if they're undefeated or just have that one loss against Oklahoma, now that hurts them because now Oklahoma's got 3 losses, right? So, but it also makes Alabama look bad, right? I mean, if you're going to continually do this and you say, well, but Alabama lost to Texas at home. This is like with Florida when they got into the BCC, the BS. They lost to, I think, Ole Miss at home or something, and that's when Tebow came out and said, we're going to come back, we're going to do all this shit. And they gave him a shot in the game against Ohio State, and they beat Ohio State. I think that was that year. It might have been Oklahoma. I think that was Oklahoma because Tebow has won 2 championships, but he was a part-time player when Chris Leak was at Florida State, or Florida. He came in and did the stupid shit at the touchdowns and stuff like that. But he was not, you will say he's this and that. They had the greatest defense those 2 years, and then they had Chris Leak, who was decent enough at quarterback. And then when Tebow went there, obviously they were good, but they lost with him there. and they got in. So what do you think in the comments? Do you think that I'm just being paranoid? Do you think that if Florida State goes undefeated, they're going to be in the playoffs no matter what? If Ohio State or Michigan win out, if let's say Georgia wins out, you would think that we're in there. And if everybody wins out, we should be okay. There's only five. Well, no, there's 5 teams. No, there would only be 4 teams that would be undefeated, and that would be either Michigan or Ohio State would be undefeated. In that case, we're in. But if Georgia loses to a 1-loss Alabama in the SEC championship game, and if Washington wins out and beats Oregon, and Oregon's only losses are going to be against Washington, this is what I think is going to happen. I think Michigan's going to beat Ohio State. Ohio State has not really impressed me at all, though, but maybe they're holding back until they play Michigan. I think there's a very good chance that Alabama beats Georgia. Georgia, I think that it's a very, very good possibility that will happen. And I think that Oregon's going to beat Washington. I'm not sure if we're going to win out at all. You know, we have our times that when we play that we're not playing very well. And we're basically winning these games with our depth. And it's not going to be something we can do if we get to the playoff. It's going to be very difficult to do this against better teams. I should say that now, but I don't really concern myself with Washington. If we somehow to play them in the playoff, I don't think they're that good. They have a good quarterback. Oregon's better than them, and Oregon should be in the playoff if they were undefeated right now. It's just again, it's just me being paranoid, but I think that it could really hurt us. We could be pushed out, and they will take Washington over us if they beat Oregon twice. I think they will, because we don't have any. Because I really wanted LSU to beat Alabama, and it didn't happen. And you just don't know what'll happen to LSU. You know, they may just go off the deep end. We got Miami at home, and Miami's lost 3 of the last 4, and then we got Northern Alabama at home, and then we have Florida on the road, and Florida continually loses. Now, they're going to play well against us. They normally do. It's going to be a tough game, but we're not going to get any credit for it going to Florida. It'll probably be at night, and that's how they want to make it, because they don't want the SEC. They don't want Florida State to be in the playoff. They just don't. So they're going to try to do something, and we'll probably have to deal with SEC officials too. No, we should have ACC, but the ACC officials are shit as well. And then who are we going to get in our championship game? Like North Carolina, there's just nobody there that's going to give us anything, because North Carolina has been losing games as well. So I just think that our resume is not going to be as good when Washington say, look, we did this, we beat Oregon twice. And if Georgia loses to Alabama in this SEC championship game, and that was their only loss in the last 2.5 years, I just don't believe that the community is going to say, yeah, you should still be in. They're going to still say that it's going to be in. And they're not going to keep out Alabama, because Alabama won the championship. If everybody still believes that the SEC is the greatest conference of all time, and they'll say, well, see, this is why it's so competitive. I'm like, okay, it's Alabama and Georgia. And every now and then it's LSU. And everybody else is out. And again, Ole Miss is in the top 10 now too, and they lost to Alabama. So this is another, I think that's a very good argument, if you're being unbiased, that Florida State could be pushed out in the scenarios I give. And I probably talked way too long about this. This should have been like a 5-minute video. But anyway, tell me what you think in the comments below, and we'll talk about it there. You guys have a good day. Let's go, Noles. Bye.